Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Ayman for another review. And back to new releases. We are doing our spoiler discussion on The Creator, directed by Gareth Edwards, which is now at cinemas worldwide, and a film that I think has had a lot of discussion online. There's a lot of things to talk about. But first of all, Ayman, how are we doing today?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. A little bit tired because I watched The Creator last night.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that screening. Everyone at home, we've given a spoiler warning. We do want to hear from you, so please do comment your thoughts on the film. I know we did a spoiler-free review before it came out. Obviously, that's pre-recorded, so if you have seen it, let me know what you thought. If you want to go into anything in a bit more depth, things you like, things you didn't like, do comment along and let us know. And if you do like this video, there will be a lot more new releases. The film festival starts on Wednesday. I'm currently under the weather, so I'm trying to make sure that I am up for that. So yeah, get us on social media, and you can do so at linktree.com/cinemasavvy. All our links are on there, and link to Redbubble if you do want to pick up any merch. But Ayman, jumping over to you first, I'd kind of love to know, heading into this, I know we spoke about it before, I'll do mine after because I saw it earlier, but I just want to be sort of curious, what were your thoughts heading in, like before this came out? Like, I know you've seen the trailer, but obviously I know you've seen Rogue One, that's a really dumb question, but
Yeah.
Your thoughts heading in.
So it was one of those where I remember watching the trailer months ago and it looked really interesting. And then I just never seen anything after that for a couple of months, and then they started ramping up the sort of trailers and stuff. And it was one of those where my dad mentioned it just to remind me, saying like he wants to go watch it. So at that point, I started like getting back into it, and yeah, it was really interesting going in because I saw the trailer months ago, thought that it got delayed in all the strikes and stuff because I just didn't see anything about it after. But going in, I was really intrigued because it was one of those where it looked like it was like a mix of the Matrix and sort of that sort of sci-fi action sort of stuff, and it was yeah, I was really interested in going in.
No, absolutely, and I'm kind of with you on that. That there's been so many films delayed, and there'll be films that people might not know were coming out. Films that didn't even start the marketing circuit that have obviously been delayed with the writer's strike, the actor's strike. Obviously, the writer's strike's now finished, which is great. It's great that a deal's been made, and obviously we are still waiting on them to negotiate with the SAG to meet those. And this is what's kind of been interesting with this film is that in regards to the release, it's probably one of the most poignant films being released because it is very much not the AI film, but to release this now, I thought was a very interesting decision from them. I know it's not, I mean, we'll talk about the budget later on. It's an $80 million budget. Yes, that's a lot of money still, but in respect to how Indiana Jones, Mission Impossible, The Flash have all been sort of $250 million, $300 million budgets, for the creator as a whole just to look the way it has on a shoestring compared to those, still a blockbuster, but it is remarkable how well this film does look, and there's loads of interesting behind the scenes on this that I think and more will no doubt come out over the coming months. But it is interesting, and kind of for me heading in, I was excited for this. Gareth Edwards, I absolutely love Rogue One. I absolutely love his Godzilla film. I've still not seen Monsters. I've watched no films this month aside from Fincher one, so I didn't actually get to watch it. I've had it on a shelf for about 3 years, so it was a bit good, and I couldn't watch it in time for this. But his director I'm very fond of. He shoots scale remarkably well, and obviously I'm a bit biased, but he's from the same sort of county as us, so that's always like an extra bit that I'm going to back that. And also, just as a massive fan of Rogue One, the one thing I like about Star Wars, for me at least, or it's like any franchise I enjoy, where a director comes on board, does a film that I love, I'm going to end up following that director's films moving forward. The same with actors. And 7 years since his last film's come out, which is ridiculous. I know there's been COVID and there's been a lot of other things, but it's sort of gone quiet for so long. And I know it can happen with directors, it depends about the story. And I guess for me, that a real big thing heading into this as well is that it's an original film. I know people will say it's like this, it's like this. A lot of comparisons to other famous war films or sci-fi films, which is fine. But inherently, it's an original film to me that I've not seen I'm trying to think of the last like proper original science fiction film. There'll be a really obvious one. Tenet jumps to mind because of John David Washington. And there'd have been a couple of others in the last sort of 10 years as well, I guess. But for me, I was going to back this regardless. Like, go to the cinema opening night. Yes, I was at the press screening on Tuesday. I still had my opening night tickets booked as well, because, like you, my dad wanted to watch it as well. And kind of talking about the big screen experience as well, BFI IMAX on Tuesday, followed by normal IMAX yesterday. We ended up in the same IMAX screen yesterday, which was not planned,
Yeah, yeah.
which is nice. And I'll say this, there wasn't, I'd say maybe 40, 50 people, which opening night, 7 p.m., I don't think it's as bad as it will sound. And kind of where I'm going to jump in immediately with this, for me at least, talking the cinema stuff, this is probably the biggest film to come out in respect of budget since the actor strike started, which does see the real damage. A writer strike obviously does. But what this film has is that no cast have been able to market the film. And, people can talk about Barbie, they can talk about Oppenheimer. Even Ninja Turtles had like some of the cast doing stuff before they were planning early. This has had nothing at all. So the whole press tour has been on Gareth Edwards by himself. And I do think it shows, even if the actors aren't the biggest of household names, it's about just having an online presence for marketing other than just, here's the same trailer, here's the same TV spots, here's the director doing the same stuff. Scorsese's in the same thing at the moment with Fire Moon. He's the only one that can promote that film. No De Niro, no DiCaprio, no Brendan Fraser. And it's really sort of not interesting. Obviously, it's sad, but the reason they're on strike isn't sad. It's what they need to be doing to make change. And it is these studios, as much as we do want original films to succeed, it is the studio's fault that if this film doesn't make it, I think it's on that for at least a lot of other reasons. But just kind of your thoughts seeing it at IMAX, what did you think just initially, I guess, of the film as well?
Yeah, it's one of those where if I'm going to see a film, especially films like this that are like more sci-fi action based, I do want to watch it on the big screen in IMAX. So it wasn't a question of whether I would; it was a question of when, more so than anything. And I think with films like this, especially at the moment, with the writer's strike and everything, and especially like indie films like this, which I mean, I say it's an indie film, it's not part of a big franchise. The only way these can make money and like show the studios that these films are worth doing is if people go out to the cinema to watch it, because that's where the most of the money is going to come from anyway. So if people don't go and watch this, then the studio is going to think, oh, okay, this didn't make any money. There's no point doing these films. We're going to focus on franchises. But big screen IMAX, I mean, it's one of those where I prefer to watch IMAX movies. I mean, I get it for cheaper because I've got the Cineworld ticket card, but still, films like this, I prefer to watch in the IMAX anyway.
Yeah, I'm the same with you. And what's quite interesting is that Denis Villeneuve has come out this week and he's been speaking about IMAX. And obviously, June was going to be the big release in November. November's going to have a couple of big releases, but June would have really been the one. And he spoke about IMAX. He actually says the future of cinema is IMAX and the large formats. The audience want to see something they can't have at home, that they can't have on streaming. They need to experience an event. And this has kind of made me think of Oppenheimer straight away, that Oppenheimer's grossed just under $950 million, which is ridiculous to the gazillion for a $100 million blockbuster that's a 3-hour biopic about the person that made a nuclear bomb, making 900 plus million is not normal. I know that Nolan's a name, and I know that he's a draw, but even studio estimates were talking about maybe 400 million. And Barbie, to its credit as well, people spoke about maybe it could make 800 million, maybe it could hit $1 billion if it was insane, and that's sat at 1.4. I think what it's showing now is that audiences are going to go to the cinema, but they are picking and choosing what they watch. I think pre-COVID, we're very much in that mindset of we'll watch pretty much anything. And I think obviously not just COVID, but obviously all the streaming services that are launched within the last 4 years, audiences are a lot not wiser to it, but we'll know people outside of this who will, I've got friends at work. Do I want to watch the cinema? Now I'll wait for Disney Plus, because they know it's not going to be a long wait. Whereas what happened with Top Gun last year, Tom Cruise says you're not going to be able to watch this film until like 6 months after it comes out. Okay, we'll go to the cinema. Same thing for Oppenheimer. Obviously Barbie's made its money. That's already online. But it is interesting how audiences are going this way. And my sort of 2 pence with it is, I don't have issues with the general audience not going to watch a film like this. My issues are people that complain that there's nothing good out. People that complain that, where are the original films? I'm tired of watching Marvel films. Well, go and support the original films and the Marvel. And listen, even if you don't like it, I've got no issue with that, because at least you're watching something different. And, how safe is it to have these bigger films? And I think, again, with Barbie and Oppenheimer, the worry, which is probably cemented with the dreadful new MCU, the Mattel Cinematic Universe, is the studio has missed the message and meaning of that film. Their message is more toy films, not hire a competent director and give them money to make a film.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the struggle. And with the creator, there's just something about this. Again, it's an $80 million film done by the director of a Star Wars film. Looks as good as his Star Wars film. I know there's a lot of carryover from similar. I think one of the concept artists has been ported over. Obviously, Ayman in the visual effects, which is very similar. And with it being sci-fi, the best looking sci-fi films will always look like Star Wars to an extent.
Yeah.
And kind of segueing with that basic experience, with this being a sports discussion, we're going to go through some of the big moments from the films. Now, if you're watching it live, we do want to go through based on the chapters that the film has. However, we can't find the list of the chapters. If you're watching it, you'll know I know that there's the child, the friend, the mother. There's a few others. We don't want to get it wrong. We don't want to embarrass ourselves, and we can't get a list of it, which is equally as frustrating. So we are going to just go through the core of the film, and I guess kickstart what I want to begin with. We'll do the sort of pre-titles. Obviously, the big thing for me was we spoke before live about that, the AI side of it. I love the retro 50s aesthetics that this film goes with at the beginning, that it's the old black and white TV adverts. And very quickly, it's almost doing the quickest catch us up to date you can do, which is here's the evolution of robots into AI, into a war, into where we are going to be now. Heading into the death of his wife, aka Natoya as well, which we'll talk about. But what were your thoughts on that AI, I guess, timeline, which is an interesting point.
I think so. As I said, I watched it with my dad and the rest of my family. I enjoyed that bit because it was one of those where, with a lot of these films, with the play on the concept of AI, is the same thing sort of over and over again, which isn't a bad thing because it's just expected. But then the only criticism I heard was from my dad where he wanted a little bit more of that. But I think it's one of those where if you did try to flesh that out, it's sort of going over the same thing, like I mentioned, like Terminator and like Matrix. It's that same sort of thing over and over again. So you don't really need it. But I think to do it in that sort of retro sort of way was really different compared to how everyone else does it, pretty much. And I imagine it saved on budget there as well.
Yeah, I do think you're right with that. And I remember there was a bit of controversy with the trailer that they used.
Yeah, the Beirut explosion.
The Beirut explosion footage. And I think that was not just a mistake in terms of controversy. Obviously it was, but I believe that wasn't actually meant to be in the trailer. It was like a previous template, which there's a few others of them. We'll talk about the soundtrack for Hans Zimmer a little bit later as well. But yeah, that sort of stuff I quite like. And I think when you're doing this, the audience has got to be smart enough to catch up. And I guess what they're trying to show with this is the AI isn't going to be, it's not Terminator. They don't look exactly like humans. I like that we just got a bit more into it, that yes, there's going to be droids. There's also going to be like half-masked people to make them fit in. And I quite like that. And I guess there's like an initial approach to the film. It's more unique in that respect, that there's a distinct design from the get-go. Yeah, you know with their AI, they've got the little circle on the back of their heads. And just, again, how that looks visually, I absolutely love. And I also love the droid stuff, because that does make me think of Star Wars. That does make me think of Lucasfilm. And obviously when that's been my intro to sci-fi as a kid, even sort of the prequels with droids, like we grew up watching that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Battle droids, super battle droids, really cool designs. Clone Wars did the same thing. I quite like seeing this sort of thing that doesn't just look like droid is human. There has to be a distinct look, and this film really delivered with that. And what I kind of liked with the opening is I've seen the film twice now, so I'm very lucky in that respect. But it sets up all of the character arcs we get in the film. We've got Maya, who played by Gemma Chan. We've got her sat pregnant with Joshua, played by John David Washington. Even in this opening sequence, we even have other characters who are going to pop up, which I absolutely loved. I think Drew's his name, played by Sturgill Simpson. And on the second viewing, everything's clicking from the opening scene. You can actually see the whole film coming together from that opening 5 minutes. But not a character we're going to talk about, but an actual machine. I want to talk about Nomad, because it's almost the opening of the film is seeing this space station. This got to be one of my favorite sci-fi things I've seen in years. And I'm not jumping on recency bias, and I don't want it to come across as recency bias, but looking at that in the air, almost as a character, it reminded me of like the monster from Nope, well, the alien, I guess, from Nope last year, which it technically is. Just it's this like horrible omnipresence above them, and it's like raining death, like a not like a Godzilla type, because that comparison's too easy. But throughout the film, this Nomad device is actually engineered into one of my favorite sci-fi things I think I've seen in a while. And it doesn't look like something I've seen before. I started thinking it doesn't look like something like Star Wars. It doesn't look like something like Halo. It is something new within the science fiction genre, and I just think that sort of stuff is what I'd like to see in films like See at the Cinema. I don't want another Death Star. No. I don't want to do this, and I think it really shows what the industry is missing. That there's been one proper original film, and I'm all over it. And not to, there's a lot of great independent films out at the moment I've not seen, and I understand that. But in terms of blockbusters, I just think it's remarkable this film has even been made, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think with Nomad as well, like when I first saw it, it reminded me of I can't remember the name of it, but from Elysium, the big. It was just sort of one of those that was just always omnipresent around that film. And just sort of like being there in the sky, that everyone on Earth can see it at all times. I mean, obviously, it's a different sort of purpose. I mean, Nomad was there to hunt down AI, and Elysium was this sort of Elysium. But yeah, with Nomad being there, it's just one of those. It's always omnipresent, which is really interesting, and the way that it works.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing you want from it. That as the film engineers further, the finale of the film ends up being set on that station, and the purpose of the film is to destroy it. And what I didn't notice in that first viewing is that in the opening sort of segments, they actually indicate that the AI was winning the war until they created Nomads. And that sort of turned the hand, almost a bit like the nuke, I guess, in real life history. That I mean, the war was ending anyway, so that's kind of done within itself. But it is that they're building the weapon to end the war, and that's what the Americans have done with this. And this film is very anti-America in that respect, and this will get compared to probably loads of Vietnam films that have explored these in their paths. Obviously, the Asian setting is going to be massive with that. I think they're shot in Thailand for quite a bit. It's shot all around Asia. A ridiculous amount of film done on location, and if people are curious about this, and again, I'm not just here to slag off Disney films. I'm not here to slag off technology out of the volume. Sorry. The question I always have is: you should do CGI when you just can't do it practically. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, but when we're seeing $300 million films, which are so clearly set on the volume, and they look awful and they look fake, and this is coming out with an $80 million budget, where there's been a guerrilla crew going around shooting on location across Asia for the footage to then go to ILM to do what they want to do with. That's to me a fundamental, not just approach, but it's getting the budget out of this film. Now, I've still not seen The Flash. I'm gonna have to watch it by the end of the year, but that film's $250 million, and it's gonna make I think it's gonna make like a 300+ million loss total. Indiana Jones, 300 million that budget. It looks fine, but it doesn't look like a $300 million film. Mission Impossible, 290 million. Also doesn't look like a $300 million film. Looks great though, but this is an $80 million film, and I can't wrap my head around that Gareth Edwards has used this budget so well, and I believe he's like Christopher Nolan with Oppenheimer being 100 mil. He has had his approach of, this is the budget I have for the film, and I will work around this. I will change certain things in my approach to filmmaking. For example, they opted to shoot on location with the smallest crew possible, to then in turn have it all on location rather than building sets and studios and hiring big crews. And kind of alongside that, the biggest talking point I've seen with the tech side of it, this film was shot on a Sony camera, which cost $3,000. For anyone curious about that, okay, we saw it in IMAX. It's formatted for IMAX. But this, Gareth Edwards was talking about sort of the ISOs, and anyone that knows sort of camera technology will know that sort of stuff. But basically said that the new modern cameras have got so good, they don't need the big cameras anymore. And I think they said that some of the industry standard film cameras are like 10 grand a day to rent. And if his $3,000 camera has done the job for an entire film, that's a couple of $100,000 straight away that can go back to the visual effects team, or for another way to move that budget around. And it is so interesting for me again, I'm not just overhyping the film's budget, but the approach to the filmmaking. I think it's really demonstrating how wasteful I think studios have been with money. I think that's probably a better way to look at it. That we see, for example, Marvel's going to internally have a union soon for VFX because of how awful they are with the VFX artists, which is great to see they're stepping up, because if anyone's read into how bad they are treated, it is remarkable. But at the same time, you sort of sit there thinking, again, how has this other director come and done this, and yet none of you can do that? And it's almost like an arrogance, I think, that these big producers have, that we're just going to change this, and they just assume that everyone's going to be okay with it. They assume that people will turn up. Of course they will. But when you're going to get other things, for me, I don't know if you've ever seen Ex Machina, which is a really good film. That I remember that won Best Visual Effects at the Oscars. That was a $10 million film or something ridiculous, and that beat out Star Wars, which is $250 million. Now, I wouldn't say Lucasfilm are embarrassed. Like, we'd never know that. But on paper, you'd say, how does a $250 million film not beat a $10 million film for VFX? Now, Ex Machina is different because it's set in one location. It's like a couple of robots. But the logic is, look at what this did with its budget. How has it done this with its budget? And I think that's what the creator has. I'm not saying Star Wars has ever been wasteful of CGI. Star Wars still has the best. I think Marvel and DC are your big. They seem to be the ones that change their mind at the last minute.
Yeah.
But just sorry, we'll get back on course. But just your thoughts on the CGI stuff as well, because it's going to be brought up so much of this film as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I only realized it was an £80 million budget or $1 budget when you told me. Going into the film, if I didn't know that and I went in, I would have thought it had a bigger budget than that. Definitely, there's no question. I mean, it's one of those that if I didn't know that the budget was 80 million and I went in and watched it blind, I would have thought it had a sort of Marvel level budget because of how well the special effects are done and just how sort of like real it looks in a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, for it to be shot on a sort of Sony camera with a lot of it being on location. I mean, it's one of those, I don't watch that many films like that, like as many as you do, but for it to be shot on location is one of those that really interests me as well, because it shows like that it's a sort of different vibe that you get if you're shot on location. You can tell it's different. And you don't need to worry about green screens looking fake and stuff like that, because there are some times where you can notice that is green screen, whereas this one you don't get that because it isn't green screen.
Yeah, and I think kind of saying that, I mean, we'll keep talking forwards with it. So heading up past, let's go past the opening. We know obviously we've got the setting up the stories of. I wouldn't say it's fridging what they do with Maya, because obviously the whole essence of the story becomes to wait, she could still be alive. But some people have said this one's predictable, which I kind of get, is whether they want it to be a criticism or they mean it as a compliment. But the very standard, we need to bring you out of retirement. We need you to help us win this war. This is why, insert dead wife. People might think it's a Chris Nolan film. It's not. But it's one of them where I can be fine with that. And I think sort of Gareth Edwards wise, like Godzilla did it very similar with, the wife cut off in the opening. Rogue One did it, the wife cut off in the opening. It's a Gareth Edwards thing. Haven't seen Monsters, can't say how that one goes. But it works as a simplistic storytelling. It's not engineered in a bad way, but it's very much moving that plot forward. And what I kind of wondered with this and heading into the retirement is the pacing of the story. We know from the trailers that the weapon is a kid. And you can look at the media of the last 10 years. Last of Us is going to be an obvious one that jumps to people's mind. The Mandalorian, the lone adult, the isolated adult, and the second child. It's worked across media for decades and centuries in literature. So I don't have a problem with it. Some people are trying to overhype on it, but I like that this film wasn't wasting time in building any of that up. It was, let's do this attack. Let's get this town. Let's get this weapon, find it, destroy it. And what I absolutely love about the whole sequence, and again, getting into that American politics stuff, the Vietnam films, you've got that very colonial Marines, overly charismatic squads, like proper fist pump America. Yeah, let's go. Makes me sound terrible. Not that I love seeing it in films when it goes wrong, but sometimes I read these scenes as the more they big up these type of arrogance in squads and action films, the worse it always gets when it doesn't go their way.
Yeah.
And when we sort of get all but sort of 3 or 4 of the team wiped out in the opening 20 minutes, not that I absolutely love that, but again, it's shot in a different way. We see these people just murdering scientists left, right, center. No gravitas, no, at the start of the film, you can have the politician saying, we're not in a war with the people, we're in a war with artificial intelligence, but we're still seeing them killing those humans left, right, and center. And I kind of love the sci-fi elements that were coming with it, that, we've got these new devices, we have these new weapons that, the AI have normal guns and the humans using lasers to take out the robots. And I didn't get the character's name, but she sets off the bombs that sort of go up and drop onto the police. It's almost like a mini sort of, again, Colonial Marines made it. It's almost like the mini bodysuit, but done in smaller scale. And the way in which they out the American team, without me trying to jump ahead too fast, we'll talk about the child after, but having them all like thinking they're safely on the ship, celebrate. And you've got this new, again, like it's probably been done before. It's a tracking missile, but like the delayed sequence of it starting, I thought, they're just going to chuck her off board and have this horrible moment, but the whole team's wiped out. And it really sets up, I think, interesting character arcs, because although we've got Joshua and Alfie, which we'll talk about in a moment, we've also got, I guess, one of the villains of sorts, Colonel Howell, played by Alison Janney in this. What were your thoughts on all the Marine type stuff before we get into the weapon?
I think it is one of those, like, you can definitely get that sort of anti-American sort of vibe from this. I mean, it is one of those where they say in the film that it's a war against the AI and they're not killing humans and stuff like that. But it is one, I think it's a more American mentality where it's either you're with us or you're against us. And they're killing these scientists because in their mind, they are helping the AI. So they are like inherently against the US and they're sort of against humans, basically, which is why they're just wiping them out. But seeing like that, the soldier that sort of planted the bomb and then him getting pinned down and then you see him a couple of seconds later where he's just dead because he's been shot to bits. It is one of those that is really interesting, and you can tell it's very anti-American in that case. But I did enjoy watching because I thought this scene was going to happen about halfway through or about 3/4, not right at the beginning, and then the journey starts from there. But I thought it was really interesting the way they did that, and the fact that there's so many like there's that one scene that stands out there where John David Washington's character tells him that the cameras work off facial recognition, so that Marine is just so deadpan, like, oh, so I only need his face, and then proceeds to chop his head off, whatever, and use that. It's just really interesting to show how sort of dead these Marines are and how they work essentially.
Yeah, it's a really good point of that. And that same moment, like you think logically, right? Or they can just pick up a dead body and put it to the recognition, but their mindset is let's cut the head off or like cut the face off. And it is that that mindset, that approach. And we see it in so many films. And what I kind of love with Joshua, that he's never part of this squad. They don't trust him, clearly. He doesn't trust them at all. He's there to find his wife. And I quite like that sentiment is really where the film starts headed when we meet the child. And I've got to talk about the performance. So, played by Madeleine Voiles, I think it's pronounced. Her first on-screen credit. She was 7 years old when she shot this film. Now, child actors are probably the most, not delicate actors in the world, but there's always been certain types. There's cute child actor. There's annoying child actor. And then there is child actor who is, I don't want to say like acting, that's really unfair. I jumped to like Natalie Portman and Millie Bobby Brown as the ones you see when they're like 11, 12 years old. And you can tell on the spot, that isn't a child actor, that's a normal actor. And I'm not discrediting like kids in cinema, because there's loads of stuff about this. And even with the SAG strikes, people should read up on the clauses of how the SAG treat child actors. The UK's got completely different laws over here for like kids on set. Harry Potter's the most obvious example. They went to school whilst they were working. It is insane how the Americans are with the approach and neglect they have. Equally, terrible parents are as much to blame for a lot of the problems that happen to those kids too. Her performance in this film is easily the best performance in this film, and that's not a discredit against anyone else in it. I did not expect to be emotionally invested within this character, whose opening scene is just sat there watching TV and slowly trickling in not just the performance but more dialogue, building the relationship. It's not just Joshua or John David Washington building that relationship. It's the pair of them together and the chemistry they have and the way the film ends. I was sort of almost broken on both viewings. Like the fact the final shot of the film is actually her smiling as well. She's had the freedom. I was sort of taken aback at that performance, and immediately, as I mentioned with a couple of examples earlier, you get child actors who will be in more films, which will be great. And I can imagine instantly she'll start to be cast in a lot of other stuff. But what were your thoughts, I guess, on that performance as well, as we started getting to more of the story?
Yeah, it's one of those where, because I'd never seen her in anything before, which is expected because this is a first on-screen appearance, but it's just one of those where it's the way that she acts in this, like when she has to convey emotion, regardless of if it's happiness or sadness, she just does it so well. It's like she's been an actress for ages. But it's one of those where she plays off so well with Joshua, John David Washington, and he again reciprocates that. It's just one of those. It was really interesting, and I'm expecting to see her casting a lot of stuff going forwards, because the way that she was in this, just especially with her being the secondary main character, having all that screen time and not thinking, oh, this kid's annoying, she can't act, that sort of stuff. It was just really interesting and just really well done.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it is. That I think fundamentally the relationship with her doesn't work with John David Washington. So I keep getting his name mixed up with Joshua. It's the very typical sci-fi, right? You've got June, these incredible names. It's like, who's your main character? Paul. Same with Luke in Star Wars. It's like Joshua in this one. Their relationship is what steals it, and I just kind of love that opening scene. He doesn't put the gun on it. Obviously, he does in the later one with the field, but the fact that scientist comes in and gets like, you've got to escape.
Yeah.
I love that it is that they've hidden this child from the world, and she's going to experience it all first time. And that experience is in the middle of a war. Like, she watches the base she's grown up in get blown up through the weapon. And I kind of love where that starts to segue, and it kind of into one of the next points that we do get, the relationship moving forward with the scene at I don't know what we'd call it. Would it be? It's like not like a rice field, but that stereotypical like Vietnamese type farm. It's a farm, isn't it? Of course it is.
Yeah.
And I love that we're getting there. We're starting to see the powers. We've got the TV coming on and off. And at the same time, we've got another AI robot finding her. Yeah. And it's that like immediately, like, oh my God, that they've made the child. Like, it's this moment of worship. And at that point, the film can go two ways. I think sometimes they'll go overboard with the religious themes.
Yeah.
Happens like in sci-fi. Blade Runner 2049 is a great one with Denis Villeneuve, where the Jared Leto character sees himself as this like deity creating these AI things. But I love this, that the AI just see it as the next step of their evolution, but not a bad step. Just, oh my God, like, how has this happened? And I love that whole sequence where he can't kill her, and at the same time we're starting the cat and mouse. It's essentially a chase film, because we've got Alice and Janney on board chasing them, wanting to find out what's happened. We've got a couple of surviving soldiers who are obviously going to get off one by one. But I like the fact that the American mindset immediately is, he's still got the weapon. Okay, he's a traitor. We'll kill him too. Not even to stop and thinking he could be doing something else. Not to even know what the weapon is. It is that blind mindset of, it killed. It's going to be killed. It's the mission to be killed. And I do I don't mind how simple that is. People might think it's two-dimensional, and I know some people haven't always issues with the script or the story of this being maybe on paper thin. But I think for what it's doing, I think it's doing enough that I don't think you need to oversimplify a villain such as this when their goal is to, get the weapon, get the kids. It's going to work because then in turn you're going to build up your relationship with your protagonist, and that's why something like The Last of Us works so well, and The Mandalorian, because differing things, but there's no big threat in that first season. It's only fair to compare like a season to a film. You then have to use the future seasons to then build up the other characters around them. But the first seasons of each of those shows, I guess the game counts as well. It's about building up a relationship, and this whole film is the relationship of Joshua and Alfie. And I kind of love these little teasers where he tells her about Off, and she knows straight away that he's obviously killed it. It's not Off, but there's something else there where she's not she doesn't want to hurt him. She just wants AI to exist. What were your thoughts on, I guess, the chase scene heading into the big droid factory?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those because there's always that moments of tension where they're hiding in the building, with the other soldier who's barely alive, just hanging on, and she switches the TV on, and it causes noise, and it draws that sort of the AI and the soldiers towards that building, and showcasing her powers just to begin with about what she can do. I mean, we saw that in the trailer. We could put it together in the trailer, but to see that sort of like how she grows in this film as well with her powers, which is the main concept of why she was created. They mentioned that later on in the film as well. But the fact that she starts from turning on and off a TV to then towards the end where she's turning off Nomad, basically, it's just really interesting the way that chase scene is done, because you've always got that moment of tension where Joshua is still a soldier at that point. He's not really invested in the child, which is why he saved the soldier, because he's invested in that. He still wants his wife, but then later on down the line, it becomes more and more about Alfie and the child and saving or protecting her, basically.
Yeah, and I think kind of what works with that respect in that relationship, going back to the TV stuff, something I love, right, and I don't know if people have clocked this, the anime the child's watching, and I know someone's probably thinking like, oh, is this a famous show? It's like a fake anime show created for this film, and it's like them attacking nomads. And I thought that was amazing seeing that. It's like, and they're not brainwashing this child, but when we find out there on the film that child exists to destroy nomads, the fact that the shows it's watching is that respectively on TV. So there was a bit of propaganda, not in a bad way, because it's not trying to kill people. It just wants to destroy this weapon, which, as the film goes on, we realize it is this sort of horrendous killing machine that's comparable to so many of the great things in cinema. And what I sort of love heading past that is once we arrive in the big city, we're then sort of reintroduced to Drew, his friend. Obviously, the opening scene, he's been captured as part of the raid. I love that he jokes that he's changed side, but actually, he's not like evolved, because that's a bit on the nose. But his character his
mindset's changed.
Yeah, like he's in a relationship with an AI person. I absolutely love the name of the character. I think she's called Camille. I can't remember the name actress that plays her. Who gets like a great 5 minutes and has like a proper, not ridiculous death, but the ice cream, oh shit, it explodes. I like that we're seeing not the underworld, but this is where the sort of traditional sci-fi comes in. We've got the big city, we've got your Blade Runners, we've got that mindset coming in, and I kind of want to ask you about the location of it shooting in they call it New Asia rather than any specific country. Gareth Edwards spoke in an interview saying that when he'd been traveling in Asia, I think his partner's Asian, he said that he couldn't believe like you'd be walking in around this big city, you turn a corner and it's like farms and it's temples and it's all full of respect, and that other corner is that city style. And he kind of said that his approach when it came to this film was immediately, if this technology was real, how would the West retaliate? And I do think they're bang on that the West would go and invade another continent, even though it's got no problem to them. even though they're not affected by what these are doing. Very obviously real life similarities there with Vietnam, just picking them for the sake of it because they've got different ideologies. I love that was their angle for this, that it's not there's AI in America, we've got to kill all the American things. I like that it is continental and that enables them to, again, when you're shooting on location, they're able to go to much more exotic locations. It's not the same city skylines we've seen with these blockbusters. It made it feel so much fresher. And I kind of like that we do get to spend time in the big city and we get to see how their world is. I think the one bit that a lot of people are going to talk about is going to be the Donate Your Skin campaign.
Yeah,
because
donate your likeness.
And obviously for those that, again, SAG strikes being prominent, one of the things the studios have tried to do, they're trying it in the UK as well as America, is they'll scan an actor in for like £50. And the T&Cs of that scan is that they can use your likeness and your face for any other production, any projects. And these people will never get compensated for it. It's not just about money, it's about the ideologies behind it. And the film covers that quite in a not like a good way, but the camera sitting on there for a couple more seconds than it needed to. That is waking people up to the gravitas of not what can AI do, but what can this technology do? Because as much as the AIs are innocent in this film and they just want to survive, the corporate mindset in there that exists in the real world is also rife in here. That you can scan your face in, you will get paid a bit, but this is why the robots look like this. And I think it was a really cool little thing. And again, I don't think we've really had that with sci-fi. I think iRobot's a film people are going to talk about. But what were your thoughts on all the city stuff? And I guess as well, the apartment sort of fight.
Yeah, I think it just, because it does show that difference. I mean, from like one checkpoint, you're in the rice fields, you're in the farms. They go through a checkpoint and it's a completely different environment. And seeing Drew again and the way that he had changed his mindset and the way he was living, where before he was a soldier, he was very pro-American. Well, it seemed that way from what we saw. To him being in a relationship with an AI, him being so sort of like open-minded with the AI. I mean, he analyzes a child and sort of fills Joshua or John David Washington in about what this child can do or presumably can do potentially. And the way that the AI acts in relation to, I mean, it acts like a normal human. It's very loving towards Drew, very warm to Alfie as a child, because she, even though it is an AI, it's not deadpan, it's not dead inside. It shows her different emotions, where she's being warm and loving and not a mother figure because she isn't, but sort of being that sort of treating Alfie as a child because that's all they see, a child essentially. But yeah, seeing that sort of like donate your likeness, and then that plays on later on down the line where John David Washington, Joshua's character, sees what he thinks is his wife in the train, left, right, and center, and Drew mentions, it's probably just because he donated her likeness, which is one of those that it's sort of very, it's not a weird thing in that film to donate your likeness, whereas in here, whereas in the real world, it will happen, and we're starting to see it in the real world now, especially with the SAG strikes. I mean, I think I read somewhere that Keanu Reeves has part of his contracts in his films where that can't be done, which is one of those that is, I imagine it's going to be added to a lot of contracts very soon.
Yeah, Keanu's one's interesting because I think he'd said it a few months ago. Like, his contract is that they can't even use CGI to edit his face. Like, I think he said like not just like de-aging. I think he spoke about like having like tears in his eyes. He's like, if he was crying on camera, he doesn't want them to remove that teardrop. And at the same time, he doesn't want them to add a teardrop to make it worse. And it's really interesting how many actors would have that at the moment. And again, you have to be a big name to get away with that now. And I do think it's something that a lot of actors are going to be thinking about, are going to be reading into more and more. And not in a morbid way, not because of the strike, but when I was watching yesterday, I sat there for a moment. I was like, I wonder which actor would be the first to donate their face. Like, not like I want this to happen in real life, but if this was reality, I'd be so curious to see like which actor's going to be first, like donate their skin for a robot's takeover. I'm not going to name names I thought of. It's not anything obvious like Tom Cruise or anyone like that who wouldn't, but it sort of just picks out individuals. But I was there like, I wonder which ones would do this, and they'd be very public in telling everyone they're doing it too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But moving aside from rampant speculation about face swapping, moving on from stuff with Drew and his girlfriend as well, what I loved is we have the return to the house. So obviously bringing Drew back into it. I like that little flashback you mentioned as well, that we see that he was American, and he says as a joke to him, "Don't get native on me," when ironically he's ended up going native after, which is all. I love that when these sorts of films do this. Again, very, very 70s Vietnam film style there. When they're going, and this is again obvious on that second viewing on the opening scene, he tries to tell him on the spot that Maya is
Namata.
Namata. I mean, I know that Maya's kind of, it's almost in the name. It's not obvious until the twist is revealed, but in the opening scene, he actually says like our orders are to kill Miyata, and he's trying to tell him at that very opening scene that it's her, but obviously he can't because she's gone, he's gone, and even when Maya's in the room in the opening scene, the soldiers first come in. That's when she starts running out because she realizes they will know it's her now. And I just thought it was a really interesting approach on that second viewing. But also in line with that, for Drew's character, his death sequence, not just the fact they went back to the house and they were told of the twist. I have to talk about these like TIE fighter things in the sky. That again, what this film's done, and we'll get it more of the action sequence that comes after. Every single new design, I mentioned the droids and AI earlier, the ships, the robots, the cars, it all felt so original. It didn't feel like, oh, here's a hovering car, which science fiction always says will happen. Here's a science fiction device like this. It's like, here's like the giant wheels on the trucks, the car, and it's going to almost, it just creates something new. And the ships did that as well. They're almost like, paper airplanes that are flat, just zipping along. And I just think, again, ILM, I really want to see if there's any concept art coming out for this film, because I'd love to see what other designs they had. Because, again, it just felt new. It hadn't felt like I'm watching a Star Wars film, or I'm watching Star Trek, or I'm watching, I don't know, Terminator. It didn't feel like anything I've seen before on the big screen. And I think that's what's so exciting with a lot of the designs of ships, of cars, as I mentioned, the action sequences we're going to talk about. Even Avatar, which I really like, is original, but you can see a lot of James Cameron's early work in there. Oh, look, we've got the yellow suit from Aliens. It's now like being piloted, which is cool, but it's just an upgraded version of that. And I've got no problem with that. But this felt so original, and I think I lean towards that. But I kind of want to ask you your thoughts on, I guess, the twist of Maya being the martyr and at this point in time being alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I mean, because it hints at it towards the beginning of the film, or the very opening, because she has that tattoo that it focuses on quite clearly. Like, there is a second or two of that shot of that tattoo being on her, and then you sort of put that together. But for it to be a twist like that, for her to be, because I thought she was just the daughter of Namata to begin with, but then it turns out that she is Namata at the end, because, and then it builds on that later, where she took over the mantle essentially, because her dad taught her everything about AI, and her dad being Namata, stuff like that. I mean, that twist and the way it's done as well, is just really well done. The fact that Drew, because Drew doesn't have a big presence in the film, but it sort of like ties off his sort of arc and change really nicely, because at the beginning he's very American, very, we're gonna kill the AI, and then toward like his final breath is Namata is her, and sort of like just sort of not going against America, but sort of like like saying everything he needs to as his last breath, essentially. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same here, and I think you kind of want it to be done tastefully, that it isn't going to be, oh, here's a twist for the sake of the twist. It actually felt like they've engineered this in, and logically it makes sense. In the opening scene, he says to her, "These aren't real. These aren't people. These aren't your family," and we've known the whole time that it is. And I just can't. Yeah, I love the placement of the twist that it's not the last scene of the film. She was this all along. It's not the opening. It's almost that just past the halfway point, and he's now started to develop his relationship with Alfie as well. That when he has that breakdown trying to find out what that passage means that she's saying, and she starts crying because she gets upset that he's sort of getting angry and upset. That's where it really starts building up the relationship. So I do like how they engineered that, and it isn't done for the sake of it. But then bringing Ken Watanabe and her family to basically pick them up from the beach. We kind of knew we were going to get Ken Watanabe, but crazy behind the scenes. Benedict Wong was originally cast rather than Ken Watanabe. And I'm not going to sit here and compare actors, but Christ almighty, sometimes you watch a film and you think there's like an upgrade from something that's happening. I couldn't imagine Benedict Wong, no horrible intention saying that, doing this role. But it's so great to Ken Watanabe back on the big screen that we don't see him in films, and he's just got this gravitas, which I absolutely loved. But their whole sequence where it's going to ramp up now, he says, whether you like it or not, you're with us. And this child's got your DNA in it. I was kind of a tad emotional the first time when they sort of did that reveal. That I'm not going to sit here and be snobby and be like, oh, I saw this coming. It is somewhat predictable that she does die pregnant, the significance of dying pregnant, and then him finding a child a couple of years later that she's ended up creating. I'm glad it wasn't like her, they took the child and turned to a robot. I like that they scanned a human embryo to include with the AI. So a part of this child is what would have been yours. And I think that's plausible enough for me that it's not too ridiculous, it's not too over the top. And I think that's a great way of doing so, but also to get them all back on track, this group, him having to spend time with those that he betrayed. I absolutely loved it. And just kind of jumping in there, this is where I think the Nomad stuff really takes off, where we get a really good sequence of their base being massacred, and you get this. I'm trying to compare it to something I've seen recently. I've been struggling to. We've got the radio of all the screams of everyone screaming, and then the moment the bomb drops, it's just the radio silence. I'm trying to. I know a lot of films would have done this, and I don't know if it's the windpipe scene in Nope that does it as well. That's more haunting, but it is like that nuclear bomb thing. I know they don't do it in Oppenheimer or anything like that. But I'm just trying to. I feel like I've seen it recently. I can't remember when, but when the mechanism's done properly, it's done to great effect. And I think this does it as well. That they will realize that we are going to lose this war now unless this weapon does go. It can just destroy our bases, and we've got very few left.
Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, that scene or that I mean, because to begin with, in that sort of where he's rescuing Alfie, or sort of not abducting, but sort of taking back Alfie, and he turns Ken Watanabe onto standby rather than off, and he says that to her. It's just like he's not dead, he's not off, he's just on standby. And then they have that big scene in the morning where you have the sort of again, it's very similar to Avatar. Those big tanks reminded me of
that's what I thought,
Avatar. And just that sort of that scene where they send the bombs down, and they send the first one down, kills loads of people, and Alfie, again, it shows her growth in this film because she understands she has to stop this. So she goes onto the bridge and just stops the other one. And so it not powers it down, but stops the timer and stuff like that. It's just really well done. It shows her growth as well. And so it shows Joshua's growth as well in the film, because I imagine at the beginning, without that growth, he would have just killed Ken Watanabe or his character and would have massacred all of them. Whereas now he's just turning them on standby because he doesn't want to hurt them. I mean, they were brothers, is what Ken Watanabe's character calls Joshua. So it's just really interesting the way that works, and just shows the growth. And it was satisfying seeing that Marine be killed just by 2 shots, because again, it shows that development. Joshua doesn't want to kill the Marine, but
He's going to save the child.
he shot Alfie. At which point that not demands retribution, but sort of it's not an eye for an eye, but that he is now a threat to Alfie, and he has to do what he can to protect her.
Yeah, the whole sequence you mentioned there is, I think, it's my favorite sequence of the whole film. And I said this in the spoiler-free review. There's a part of this that I was watching, and I was like, I want to play this on like my PlayStation. That whole action bit is like, not like Call of Duty and steroids, but I'm sat there like, someone please make this into a game. Like, I don't care about, I don't go on my PlayStation much these days, but I was like, the creation of these armies, of this world, of these designs of the droids, of the AI, of the weapons, of the tanks. I want more of this. And I'm not sitting here saying, give me sequels, give me prequels. No. I mean, like, I just want more of whatever this is. And I just love a game. Would be honestly remarkable. And that's credit to Gareth Edwards, that what he's created feels so original and compelling, that I love that this massive tank thing is like, it's visually targeting them. And I like that. I think my understanding is when they put the smoke out, the AI can't see through smoke. I don't know if that's a thing or if that's what I read it as. But it's sort of even out. But I just love that we get that one droid, I couldn't remember its name. He realizes he's been targeted, runs, sees the family, and he's like, he knows he's dead because he's not going to go in and kill the family. He's going to take it himself and just run the opposite way. And I loved all of that so much. But I've got to give a shout out, and I was laughing a lot. And I think a lot of people are on the press screening on Tuesday. I don't know what on earth we're going to be calling. It's like Bullet Bill if he was a bomb. That thing that she tells the droid go out for like 1 minute and just run. The fact that a suicide droid, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, right? The two towers with the Uruk-hai with the thing.
Yeah.
To put personality into something as minute as that in the space of like 20 seconds of screen time, I thought was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I wanted more of them. It's like my favorite catch from the film. The way, and it's the way Gareth Edwards shot it as well, that we're having the smoke on the bridge. And everyone's like, what the fuck's this coming on the distance? And it's just this like...
Yeah, they just don't know,
It is just, it's vertical Bullet Bill. I think it's basically just that now. And the way in which they do the explosion is horrendous as well. Like, it is brutal. It doesn't stop for anyone. It's just goal is to run for a minute and detonate. And I like how that then sets up Alfie's moment, stopping it on the bridge, powering it down, which is going to come in handy 10 minutes later when we get to the temple too. But all of these things just have these little moments which makes this film, it gives it personality that, as I kind of said, I can excuse there being a somewhat predictable story or characters. But when you're fleshing out the world such as this, like, I don't want to make digs at Zack Snyder. I know Rebel Moon Part 1's coming out in December. And there's now a big legal case that a games company claiming they've had to develop the whole language and backstory to the world that Zack Snyder took credit for. If anyone wants to read into it, you can. It's actually really fascinating about what's just gone down. But I genuinely felt like this isn't a film that's needed. Here's 100 years of backstory. Like George Lucas, it's just ended up being, this is cool. I'm going to design this type of droid. And then we fill in the rest. And I just kind of wondered your thoughts. We haven't really spoke about the action, but again, the Rogue One comparisons, it just looked so good. Like the film and those action sequences.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is the only big action piece of the film, from what I can remember. Or it is the biggest, especially with the tanks and everything. But I think the fact that they sprinkled the brutality of this in there as well, you see the sort of AI. You see the AI, you see the droids, and you see the humans all fighting together, and you see them die together as well. I mean, you touched on that, where the droid knows he's going to die. He's been targeted, and he is running for his life. He knows he's not going to make it, but he sees that family and then decides just to run backwards because he doesn't want to endanger the family and the kids crying. It just shows again that sort of like humanity of the AI, which is really weird to say, but the humanity of the droids. and just to show how they've developed over however long they've been in in existence, essentially. And it shows them all living together, which is
Yeah.
something that's done in the temple scene as well. It just shows they have a real community where there's humans and there's AI and there's droids just all living together, like peacefully, essentially.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, and I think that adds a bit more humanity. Not humanity, but the point is AI is they're not just robots.
Mm.
But I like that is what it's done with it, and that no matter what people's thoughts on AI are, what this film not AI, sorry, no matter who wasn't AI, this film is at least challenging the themes of like, no, we know that AI is not AI is a technology. From my personal belief, needs to be used properly.
Yeah,
Like it can function to our society, but it's the extent of how people want it to function and what the agendas and mindsets to it are. I've got no issue with the concept of it, but it has to be like police. Before these like chat GPT things where like kids are doing essays, people aren't
yeah,
thinking before things are being commissioned. And it's one of those where I don't mind for now. I'm like off it because I don't think our society is ready to handle AI. That's my
mm.
belief right now. But if it was to be managed and slowly integrated properly, then I have no issue with the concept of AI. Like a dreadful example is football. Automated offsides were at the World Cup last year. Scanning from cameras takes 10 seconds to tell you if it's offside that was from a referee. They've chosen not to do this in the league this year, and these terrible
Yeah.
referees are continuing because it's human error. So, there's going to be pros and cons for everything. But that's segueing away from this. Let's talk about the temple. This is the bit that's been all over the advertising, the background, the monk droids, the temple on the
Yeah.
sunset. The fact that Maya's alive, and it's probably the most brutal part of the film, is that he finds out Dindan means heaven.
Yeah.
Before he goes in, and we're sort of there like, wait, what? Like, so what's he going in to see? Like, is she AI? Is she this? And the worst possible scenario is that she's alive in a coma, but it's against their programming to turn off life support. So they've essentially waited for a human to come to do it, which is actually horrifying when you think about her existing for 5 years in this float, that the child inside of her died. But just the image of Alfie crying with her, I thought was pretty powerful. And the whole build up to John David Washington having to make that decision. Like, we've spent an hour and a half with him trying to get his wife back for him
Yeah, and
to
he finds her like
have to
that.
be the one to kill her, and it has to be
Yeah.
him. And I think it's so well done, the emotions with it, and credit to Gareth Edwards' directions, the story writers for this. The use of flashbacks without ever overdoing them, it built to this moment, and it's such a devastating but beautiful moment. I couldn't quite believe it watching it. And again, it's not something I expected from a film like this. But what were your thoughts on, I guess, the temple sequence before the army come into it?
I think it was, again, it shows that community where they have AI raising kids because those kids have nowhere else to go. And they have droids essentially, because there is that differentiation there where there's AI and there's droids, and they're both able to raise these kids that have no other parents. And it plays on that. Namata or his wife was, she mentions it before, she was raised by droids and AI. And stuff like that. I mean, seeing that first shot of the temple with the backdrops, I think they shot that in the Himalayas on set as well. Seeing that shot is just really so powerful because it shows the contrast between the sort of humans and the AIs and stuff, with the sort of with nature in the background being the Himalayas. And yeah, the realization that they play it up because he says, or the droid says, like, she's been like this for 5 years, and then you don't know what to expect, because I was expecting her to be not in a coma. I was expecting her to be sort of like just not broken, but like having AI parts or robotic parts, like he is. Like, he's lost an arm, he's lost a leg. I was expecting her to be like that, but her being in a coma is so much worse, because there's not much that can be done. she is alive and dead at the same time, and the fact that he has to be the one to turn her off or turn off her life support, yeah, it's just harrowing because the main point of this film has been him trying to find his wife, and he's actually done that, but it's not in the way that he wanted or we expected. Yeah, and just to see Alfie lying with her as well when he walks into the temple, again, it just shows it's just sad. Because she has never known a mother, and then she finally meets a mother, and it's like that. It's just, yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah, and a kind of a big thing with that is that the Americans then attacking instantly again is as traditional as it can get. That you take this moment of solace and it's ruined by the sirens and them coming in for the kill. We get Alison Jane's character, the general, getting killed in this scene, which is the most American moment possible, the most human moment where the kid saves her life, and the soldiers around her, the weapons turning on, it's going to get us, and that is what kills them all. And I think the general, I think Alison Janney had this moment. She realized this kid's just saved my life, but it's their reaction to it, and it's as American as it gets. And people might mean it as like a bad thing, not like a racist way, but like that American agenda of us versus them. That is everything about that moment. Like, oh my god, this kid's doing something good. Oh look, it's a weapon. It's live. It's going to get us. It's been done so many times. It happens in real life a lot, you know. It's the great meme of Eric Andre, and it's like, why would he do that? And it's him shooting the other person. You know, it happens, and it's a great way for that character to go, because you do hate it. You don't want to have a redemption. But it's just this brief second of, at least you realize that AI wasn't evil all along. A moment before she did get blown. You see one of their helmets go right past them, like flying the other way. And kind of the Joshua bit you mentioned, that he says at the start of the film, I would do anything to have one more minute with her. And we'll get to the end of it shortly, but heading up to the finale, where, you know, they've captured it. I didn't clock it on the first screen. They say that we've been able to hack this and find out the coordinates of all the final bases. I'd argue this is where the script is maybe not weak. The final acts, the whole Namada, it felt somewhat rushed. And the reason I say that is because it all happens very quickly. We're taking them we're taking a prisoner, you need to kill her, we're going to blow up Nomad. It's very quick. Now, I don't mind that. It worked for me. And I don't want to compare it to Star Wars unfairly, but one of the things you hear about Rogue One with Gareth Edwards being replaced at the end of the shoot was they couldn't get the ending to work. And they just couldn't nail that final ending. And I know that it was very amicable terms. He still promoted the entire film. There was still a lot of that together. But it did make me wonder somewhat with this, that I loved the ending we got, but it's very quick in getting there. I loved the fact that Finch from The Office, he pops up in everything, is like the general in this, which is kind of hilarious. But I liked the whole plan with the standby to the kids. I was crying. I was watching that, I'm not going to lie. I could hear other people crying in the cinema yesterday. But someone sat near us was crying for a whole hour, basically, at the end, which was really annoying. Just minor cinema gripe, you know, when there's like basically, it's not even half empty, is it? When the screen is like a tenth full, why are two people booking next to two other people? It's ridiculous. It's weird. And then they get popcorn out and start crying heads. But with the ending, I kind of liked it. When it's like we're going to the moon, they'd obviously kept that quiet. That they can make sense. If they can do AI, they can go to the moon. That's gonna. I'm sure it's going to happen at some point in the next 50 to 100 years. Whether we're around for it or not, I don't know. But I will not be surprised if that is tried. And I like that the goal is to destroy the station without over summarizing the scene. Yes, it is somewhat quick, but I have no issues with how it plays out, how they do it. I think my issue, what makes it quick, is suddenly they've got the weapons and suddenly they're going to now destroy all the bases. Did it happen on the same day? Did it happen like 2 days after? There's almost no detail to it. But I can let all that drop because I've been following this sort of father-daughter relationship for the first 2 hours, and I want to see how it pans out. And obviously it pans out in a sort of brutal but beautiful way at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of those where, but the time between they're captured and the time that she's being interrogated or whatever, I don't need to know anything that happens in that because it's just not going to push the story forwards. It's not going to show anything apart from how cool the Americans are, basically. Because the general does mention like we've been trying everything, but she's just not giving us anything. If you don't get anything out of her now, it's gonna be a lot worse for her. And even though she is an AI, to see her strapped down in that chair is just really not sad, but it's just weird. It's just weird. It gives you a negative feeling. But that whole scene where they're escaping, and then they get to the bridge, or not the bridge, but the where they have to present their documents and stuff like that, and Joshua realizes, oh shit, I haven't got that sort of stuff, and she's just able to put the hand on the robot, and they just let him pass. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's rushed. I'd say it's not. I have no gripes against it. It is a little bit rushed compared to the rest of the film, but I think there's nothing that I wanted more fleshed out in that sort of part. I mean, you've seen Nomad throughout the rest of the film. You've seen the agenda. You've seen that sort of. I mean, if anything, it pushes that relationship a lot closer because they're basically father and daughter at that point. But yeah, I mean that sort of stuff. Yeah, I understand if you're gonna cry. I didn't cry, but it was extremely sad and sort of not upsetting, but yeah, it's just one of those. Yeah,
it earned the moment, and I think
Yeah.
it's quite remarkable that I spoke earlier about Last of Us and Mandalorian. Their big emotional moments are at the end of 8 episodes of a TV series together.
Yeah.
Not you've been with them an hour and a half. And I think that is the power of cinema sometimes, about sounding like, one of those sort of cinephile type things that when the script has done that, the performances have done that, the visuals, everything has come together to craft this relationship, and it's delivering. It absolutely doesn't. When it gets to the ending, you mentioned Elysium earlier, which is one of the big go-to films compared to this. The ending was very Elysium-esque, the lead character having sacrificed himself. I don't mind that. And again, he kind of said at the start of the film, he's already extinct. He had no purpose left. And the only thing he cared about seeing his wife for one more minute. People say this is cheesy. I don't really care. He gets the reunion with his wife. My dad compared it to Gladiator because they're on like the wheat fields. I don't mind it. I like the fact that they do have that moment of solace that he isn't just an escape pod dying, that he at least gets something. But without jumping too quick to the ending, I love the moment of Alfie coming out the capsule, realizing what happened, and the smile. It's like first she's upset, and then she's like, it's like an upset into happiness. But yeah, it's and that's jumping into the end. Do you think got anything else in the final scene before we go into final thoughts and probably say our favorite scene?
Yeah, I mean that bit where he has that moment in the wheat field or the cornfield or whatever. I think that does tie full circle because he does say towards the beginning, I just wanted one more minute, and he does get that sort of one more minute. But yeah, I think when the sort of last little like 10-15 minutes where Alfie is in that escape pod and she realizes that Joshua is sacrificing himself to save her, and he is content with that, but she doesn't really understand. She's like, keep pushing, because she wants to save him as well. But again, it shows her sort of child side more than anything, her human side, because she cannot process that he is dead regardless. She just wants to save him. But yeah, I think at that point, if you do shed a tear at that, I have no like. I mean, as I said, I didn't cry, but it is one of the more upsetting sort of parts of the film, essentially, where you see it from Alfie's point of view, just Joshua just not fading away, but getting smaller and smaller as she shot out that pod. But yeah, seeing her coming out of the pod, being upset initially, and then smiling because she has achieved what she was built for. Without because she always says it throughout the film. She just wants AI to be free, and she does achieve that. And her realizing that she has established that is just really well done.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. And I like the fact that this final shot is there. There's no politics to end it with. No, the war has ended. This has happened. There's no newscast. It is just that moment of their celebrations. And what I quite liked early on in the film when they say, when we win this war, guess what we're going to do to the West? Absolutely nothing. And it'll be, again, I'm not saying they're talking about sequels, but I'd be so curious. Like I'm so invested in the in-world story of this film and the politics and the world that I would love to know what would happen. I'm not asking for more or anything, but it is something incredibly unique for me. And it's something that I'll probably be thinking about for quite a while to come, if I'm being completely honest with this film. And kind of segueing from that, if I go into my final, before my final thoughts, I want to point out my favourite scene. I've worked out by now. Not just the kamikaze robot tin thing. That whole action set piece that had been building. Again, to do that on an $80 million budget is ridiculous. It looks better than most films I've seen this year. The fact that this film is consistent. Sometimes you watch a film with a low budget, right, and there's one big scene, and you can see that's the expensive thing, that's costing everything.
Yeah.
And this is it's the consistency from the opening scene through to, we've had all these big moments. Now it's like, now we're going to do a sequence set in space. And you're like, what? Yeah. And it is just so well done, this whole film. But my favorite scene has to be just the fight scene. We've said they're in a war. We've seen them on guerrilla missions. Let's see how their fighting is within the war. And I like that we get that. We get science fiction. We get new weapons, old weapons, merging of technologies. I love that it absolutely nailed everything it needed to in that respect. And that's what's my favorite scene. Yeah. Ultimately, I'm in the cinema trip to enjoy myself, to watch something new, something science fiction. And it delivers of all of those things, and that's where I'm fully invested with it.
Yeah, I think that is my final scene as well, because it blends so many elements of the film together so well. It blends the sort of sci-fi action, it blends that sort of humanity, shows you the community, and yeah, if it was any other film, you could tell that there was budget spent on that. I think apart from that, though, I think the final scene of Alfie shutting down Nomad, and just her making her way through the base whilst everyone is on full panic. I think that's my favorite scene as well, and the scene where Joshua is reunited with the AI version of his wife. I mean, it's her mind, but so that is my favorite scene because that's what his arc was building for throughout the whole film. So for him to actually get that, even though it's on a burning base, it's just really well done. And yeah, that's my favorite bit.
That's fair. And kind of me segueing off the final thoughts of the film. Listen, I loved it on Tuesday at the first viewing. I recorded that review as soon as I got home. I hadn't had time to think about it. I've been thinking about this film across the week. I've seen it a second time. Will I see it a third time? I don't know yet, only because there's a lot of things happening at the moment. There's a lot of other things to be watching, but I will be picking this up as soon as I'm 4K. I would love to see it again on the big screen, and it was great on the big screen, which is the most important thing for me, at least as a sort of cinema goer. And that it has shown that that you can still make original films. There are still competent directors, and kind of in line of all of those things is that I can't wait to see what Gareth Edwards does end up doing next. And yeah, I think it's one of my favorite films of the year so far. I haven't seen as many compared to normal, but I'd be very surprised if this isn't in my top 5 come the end of the year. I just think an absolute blast. And I thought I might enjoy myself. I thought I might like the film, but I didn't expect it to be not only as good as it is, but to be so invested in it and thinking about it after, which is where it has had that effect for me.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I might go see it again. It's just one of those. I am curious about how long it's going to get that IMAX run for, though, because I know The Exorcist, The Believer comes out next week, and that is being shown in the IMAX as well. So unless they're going to have slots for The Creator and for The Exorcist as well, I'd be interested to see how they do that. But yeah, it's just one of those. If you haven't seen it in the IMAX by now, I would recommend it.
Definitely. And that being said, listen, Ayman, it's been amazing to get you back on.
No,
Is going to round out this review. So, firstly, everyone that's been watching at home, do thank you for watching and comment below with your thoughts on The Creator. Did you see it this weekend? Are you going to see it? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? We want to hear your thoughts, so please do get involved. Hit the subscribe button because there's a lot more reviews coming out. We've got London Film Festival starting on Wednesday. It's going to be busy. We've got the Ahsoka season finale. We've got the David Fincher retrospective every Monday. It's a busy, busy time. A lot more stuff happening. And if you want to find out about other videos, other announcements, get us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. That's linktree.com/CinemaSavvy has all of those links. But that's going to round out this video. And once again, thank you all for watching, for supporting the channel, sticking with us. It's been great going back to do new releases. It's been a while without us doing one. That's on me. But aside from that, take care and we'll see you on the next one.